Naomi Really, and I'm a member of the Early Math Project team. We would like to welcome you to our annual symposium. If you haven't already, there's a poll on the right-hand side of your screen. If you can fill that out, we would love to know who's joining us today. We are so excited about our keynote speakers and our breakout sessions. Here is our schedule. Make that a little bigger for you all. So we're going to kick off with Linda Platas, who will be talking about mathematical practices in early childhood education. Then soon after that, we'll have 7 breakout sessions going on at once. Please look over the descriptions in today's program and choose the one that interests you most. After that, we'll have a whole group activity. We recommend that you get some pieces of paper, scissors, and tape so you can play along with us. After that, it's our optional lunch recess where you can engage with a Karigami exploration along with the vendor booths where there's 10 of them that you can get to know. We also have vendor video rooms that you can go meet CMC and Mathical. Also during this time, feel free to explore the platform, have fun with our event challenges and our discussion walls. After lunch, we have 7 more breakout sessions that we hope that you will enjoy. Following that is our afternoon keynote speaker, Janae Brown-Wood. Okay, I'll pass it over to Carolyn.
Thanks, Naomi. Hi, I'm Carolyn. I'd like to point out a couple of things. First of all, we really depend on knowing what you think about this symposium, and we ask that you take some of the very short surveys that you will see throughout the day. They happen after each of the breakout sessions, actually after all of the presentations and the keynotes. We do take the time to read all of these, and it's an opportunity for you to tell us what would be meaningful for you to hear in future events. So please let us know what you think. Also, we get a lot of questions about whether or not it's possible to hear what is recorded today at a later time. The answer is yes. We do maintain a video archive, and that is posted on the Early Math Project's YouTube channel. We will announce when that goes live, probably in about 2 weeks from now. We'll let you know through an email. We'll also announce it on social media, through our newsletter that we hope you sign up for if you're not already getting it already, and also on our website. Some of you have asked whether or not a certificate of participation is possible today. The answer is yes. At the very end of the event, we will be explaining how you can download and get this, so stay tuned. Naomi will be explaining that a little bit later in the day to you all. And also, before we move on much farther, I'd like to let you know that most of the platform can be navigated to by looking at the toolbar that is on the left-hand side of your screen. Lisa's going to be talking in just a moment about some of the things that are along that toolbar, but we want to let you know that you can access the agenda, and also you can get technical support if you need it by going to the left-hand side of the screen. Naomi created an orientation video, and if you have questions about the platform, please look on the left-hand side again, and there is that orientation video link that explains how you can get around the platform, and we hope that that is helpful for you if you're having challenges today. Lisa, how about telling us about the event challenges?
Hi, I'm Lisa Grant. I'm also a member of the Early Math Project team. I get the fun bit. We're going to ask you that you participate in today's event challenge. There are 40 or so questions that involve scavenger hunts for the platform, plexers, puzzles, and questions to get you thinking. People who play the event challenge, for every 100 points you earn, you'll be entered into our giveaway. We have 12 fun prizes, books, number blocks, and some other great items from our awesome vendors. The event challenge, as Carolyn said, can be found right there on the left-hand side of the page. If you win a prize, you'll be notified by email. We also have 3 discussion walls set up today. They can also be found there on the left. The first discussion wall is called What's on Your Mind? On this wall, you can share what you will take away from today's symposium, things you liked, a particular speaker or session, maybe something that inspired you. We would also like to hear any suggestions for future events, for presentations, discussions. We'd love to know what you'll remember most about today. And then just for fun, our second discussion wall is called Favorite Math Jokes. And we see that some of you have already shared yours. That's awesome. We've shared a couple of our favorites and asked that you share some of your own. The third discussion wall is called Math to Think About. On this wall, we've asked questions about 5 images. We welcome you to start a conversation about these images and to add pictures and questions of your own. What do you notice? What do you wonder? We'd really like to stay in touch, let you know about some upcoming events, and periodically share new free resources. If you're not already receiving the Early Math Project newsletter and would like an update every month or so, you will have an opportunity to sign up for the newsletter on the end of the day survey. So now the part you've all been waiting for. We are thrilled to have Dr. Linda Platas here joining us today for our first keynote. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you so much. I'm your host for about the next hour or so. Again, my name is Linda Platas, and I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint. There we go. I'll be talking about the mathematical practices in early childhood education. And I hope by the end that you'll agree with the subtitle here that we indeed can do this. I'll be talking about 2 topics today: what the mathematical practices are and how we can support them in the classroom. I'll also provide a few interactive examples and then some resources. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for questions. So what do you do and what can you do to support early mathematical development? As we go through this presentation, I want you to think about your role in supporting early mathematics. So what do you do and what can you do to support early mathematical development? I know we have a wide variety of folks on this call, and every person on this webinar is capable of supporting young children in their early mathematical development. For those of you who are not in a classroom yet, I want you to think about how you could support future students and take advantage of the abilities that they bring to the classroom. For those of you who are in classrooms in all capacities, thank you. You're doing such an amazing job. And I want you to think about those times in your career, no matter how short or long your career is, that you know you made a difference in a child's mathematical development, even if it was just encouragement, which is absolutely one of the biggest parts. For all of you in professional development and teacher education and other roles, think about those amazing sparks of mathematical brilliance that you've seen in classrooms and how they were supported. I want to propose a way to think about this presentation. I've always found that stories provide windows on the possibilities in life. And you'll see I have several stories throughout this presentation. I'm going to be talking about what students can do and where it will take them. To do this, I want to tell a story about Nina. Nina was 4 years old, and during quiet times of the day, she would frequently ask me to create Duplo structures so that she could duplicate them with her set of Duplos. This one's very simple, mostly confined by my PowerPoint skills and being able to rotate it on the screen. But she loved being stumped and then struggling to match my creations. This presentation begins with how these seemingly simple constructions can begin a path to later competencies. Nina is, after all, just playing with blocks, isn't she? But manipulations of objects in real or virtual space will be important skills throughout her life. She could use it to put together furniture in college, get a job in the entertainment industry, or for those of you who remember the British petroleum accident, reduce pollution in the Gulf of Mexico. Persistence is what gets us through difficult problems and helps us gain new knowledge and strategies. Mathematical problem solving is a perfect setting for developing persistence. Nina loved to be challenged. She always asked that I create a structure that was, quote unquote, too hard for her. Of course, she really didn't think it was going to be too hard. She just really wanted a good challenge. She had developed persistence. And by the way, while it sometimes took her a really long time, she nailed it every time. For the next couple of slides, I'll be talking about the common core mathematical practices. The mathematical practices were written for the K through 12 Common Core, but I want to argue here, hopefully persuasively, that children as young as 2 years of age engage in these practices. Many of the examples that I'll provide begin in these early years. And for each mathematical practice, you'll see that I have one slide for student actions and then one for student supports. Before I go on, I want to preface the remainder of this presentation by saying that children are so capable, amazingly capable, but we need to give them opportunities to engage in the experiences that support their development. So Amanda here is 2.5. I do want to share, before I begin, that these 6 animals were her favorite toys, and she loved playing with them and counting them. This is a perfect setup for supporting mathematical development. Can you count your animals?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
How many do you have?
6.
Good job. Can you count your animals? So, what are the mathematical practices? Mathematical practices are actions in which we want students to engage. Young students bring a wide variety of mathematical experiences to the classroom, but they need modeling and they need scaffolding. So Amanda didn't learn those numbers all by herself, right? She had experiences that supported those. We want students to live and breathe these practices as a way of engaging with mathematics and probably many more subjects as well. So what are the mathematical practices? Number 1, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. Students explain the meaning of the problem. They look for entry points to solutions. They consider similar problems. They use concrete objects or representations to solve problems, and they check their answers. You're probably wondering why I have a dinosaur on here, but I'm going to get to that. I want to give an example of one of these. I once had a 4-year-old student, I had a lot of those, who were obsessed with dinosaurs, knew all about them, knew what carnivores and herbivores ate, and he was so excited that he wanted to make a chart that divided up the dinosaurs that he knew into herbivores and carnivores. He wanted to know which one of those categories had more. A math problem, right? He wasn't reading or spelling words yet, but he could copy words. So I set him up with a book that had pictures of herbivorous and carnivorous dinosaurs and a large piece of construction paper, because there's a lot of dinosaurs, right? So I made a T-chart. You probably remember those from school or even your own classrooms, and off he went. He wanted to know how many there were of each, and this gave him an opportunity to count the names in each of those 2 categories and examine which group was bigger, and frankly, to explore the fact that he didn't know all of them. This was a big fat book that I gave him, which set off a conversation about how many there might be on a chart if he included all of them. Note that during this activity, we explored the meaning of his problem. We figured out an entry point to solving the problem, as we had used T-charts in the classroom before as a way of presenting data. And finally, our conversation after 2 days of working, not 2 whole days, periodically over 2 days of working on the T-chart, and led to a discussion about whether the T-chart could hold all of the names of the carnivores and herbivores. Remember, I gave him a big fat book. And whether there might be an additional way of grappling with a huge variety of dinosaurs. And then what do we do about the omnivores? So the dinosaur T-chart provided an example of what students and teachers can do together. Students should be engaged in sense making, which is exactly what he was doing. Knowing that 2 + 2 = 4 is really important, but understanding how addition fits into problem solving in the real world is really where the rubber hits the road. Also, problems that are too easy are not useful. Students need to learn how to persist in problem solving. Problems aren't problems if they're resolved upon viewing. If you look at a problem and you know the answer, that's not a problem. That's where the teacher's role becomes so important. Understanding where students are in their mathematical journey is vital to understanding differentiated instruction, that is, meeting children where they are. This slide provides guidance for teachers. Remember, I said there was going to be one for students and then one for teachers. This is the one for teachers. So teachers provide appropriately challenging problems, make sure the mathematical problems make sense. For instance, what are students being asked to do and why? Ask students to evaluate their answers and solutions, and then ask students, does this make sense? Is there more than one way to solve this problem? and then instill a joy in problem solving. I'll talk about that a little bit later too. Number 2, reason abstractly and quantitatively. Students make sense of quantities and relationships. They develop an ability to decontextualize and recontextualize. They attend to the units, and they also attend to the meaning of quantities. I want to call attention to one of these, the ability to decontextualize and recontextualize. That sounds really fancy and hard and complicated, but this is at the heart of reasoning abstractly and quantitatively. Mathematical problems frequently have context. We call these word problems or real life problems. And in order to solve them, students must first decontextualize the problem to get at the mathematics that are at the heart of the problem. So if Sally has 6 more balloons than John, and John has 8 balloons, I can see you all doing this in your head, how many does Sally have? Students need to look at the mathematics, the arithmetic part, and solve the problem. To make sure the answer makes sense, however, students need to then recontextualize the problem and plug the unknowns back into the word problem and examine it from a number sense point of view. This is an important step. For those of you who are probably trying to solve that problem, the answer is 14. Initially, children reason with quantities in a really concrete way. If I can have 3 crackers for snack and I've already eaten 2, that means I can have only 1 more. Later, students learn that these sorts of quantity questions can relate to number themselves in a more abstract way. For example, that 1 plus any whole number equals the next number. So teachers can encourage discussions of relationships. They can make connections from the concrete to the abstract, encourage the use of representations, reinforce the concept of a quantity, eventually come to understand that 4 can really describe an innumerable number of sets. It's an infinite number of sets. Number 3, construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. This might be my favorite mathematical practice, although that sounds like I'm really nerdy, which I actually probably am. After presentations on the mathematical practices, I've frequently been told that 4, 5, and 6-year-olds and even older can't do this, that they can't construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. So when people tell me this pumpkin is a hint to what I'm about to say, I ask them to think of a child, a time when a child, either their own or somebody else's, wants something very badly, maybe even desperately. Like another book before bed, more candy on Halloween. When we find ourselves in these situations, these children are very, very persuasive and very capable of critiquing our reasoning. It's a weekend. I only had 1 piece of candy so far. I'll brush my teeth for 10 minutes. Just 1 short book? I'm sure some of you have heard these in your lives. It frequently makes me wonder what law school they attended when I wasn't looking. So children do have these capabilities. We just need to provide opportunities in math discourse for them. So students can understand and use stated assumptions and definitions. They can make conjectures. They can justify and communicate conclusions, make plausible arguments, also unplausible arguments. They can constructively critique the reasoning of others, especially around candy, and ask useful questions to clarify. Teachers use prompts to help students think critically and express their mathematical ideas. They help students develop definitions. For instance, a triangle is a closed 3-sided figure. And they provide opportunities for students to talk about their problem-solving strategies. It's not enough to get the right answer or tell somebody else that their answer is wrong. Students have to grapple with why an answer is correct or incorrect. Conversations that highlight how children solved problems and then include discussions of alternative solutions can help students build their repertoire of problem-solving strategies. Similarly, understanding what went wrong can contribute to students' understanding of how to approach similar problems in the future. Number 4, model with mathematics. Students apply mathematics they know to real-life problems. They map relationships of quantities. They use representations to think about and solve problems, and they interpret mathematical results in context. Eventually, children learn that problems can be modeled mathematically. This means that figuring out how many children that are in the classroom all together can be modeled by an equation that includes the number of children with tie shoes, a plus sign, and the number of children with shoes with no ties, and an equal sign. I had a young man, it sounds like an antiquated phrase, a young man in my preschool classroom many years ago, and he was one of the children who arrived early and stayed late. I'm sure many of you remember children like that, or they're in your classroom now. I think he enjoyed those times when he had all of the attention of a teacher. So one day he decided late in the afternoon, when almost all the children were gone, that he wanted to measure the width of the classroom with Duplos. Basically, how many would it take? While the class was narrow, this still meant a considerable number of Duplos. So on this afternoon, he started connecting Duplo bricks. He got about a third of the way across the room. You know what happens next. His mother shows up to take him home, and you know what happens next. Also, she was in a hurry, so he couldn't complete his task. So I suggested that we count how many Duplos, like really fast, because she was in a big hurry, that he had used so far, and then we would write it down because we needed to use those Duplos. We were tying up a bunch of Duplos. And then we'd continue then the next day. It took 3 days to figure this out because, again, we started at the end of the day. His mother arrived. You would have thought we would have learned by the third day. But he was absolutely ecstatic. He mentioned it to everyone he encountered. It became like a game for him. Do you know how many Duplos it takes to go across the room? He was so excited about this. That was modeling. Teachers are role models for students. They use mathematics to solve their own problems in the classroom, and they involve students. They ask students to illustrate and model mathematical problems in a variety of ways, and they support the use of symbols like numerals, the plus sign, to represent real-world situations and problems. Number 5, use appropriate tools strategically. Students consider available tools. They make sound decisions about the use of tools. They detect errors using tools like estimation, and they use technological tools and resources when applicable. Students love tools. They love gaining mastery over the use of tools. For young children, this engages them in playing adults in their own world, like the pretend play area, right? Many times, these are the folks they look up to or those that they've seen in media. Think about carpenters, plumbers, or scientists. My father used a miter box. So for those of you who don't know, this is a tool that supports the joining of 2 pieces of wood. So if you look at the photographs here on the page, that second one, this one here, is a miter box, this yellow contraption here. And then there's a saw, and then there's a piece of wood put into it. What this enables you to do is to make corners, just like this bottom photo here, perfectly. It was just amazing to me. It seemed like magic. How could the 2 pieces of wood fit together so perfectly? And that this miter box helped him do that. I love the miter box. You can tell I still love the miter box. Students also think it's funny when we try out different tools and measurement. So teachers can provide opportunities for students to choose the tools in mathematical problem solving. So which tools would help them compare weights, heights, temperatures, and then ask students to model problems with manipulatives of their own choosing. Sometimes I've done things like get a thermometer and ask to weigh a pumpkin with a thermometer. And they sort of get started and they realize that the thermometer really doesn't weigh the pumpkin. And then I bring out a yardstick and I say, okay, well, let's try the yardstick next. So which tools does one use to measure weight, height, temperature? All of these questions are very appropriate for young children. Estimation is another tool. For example, if a child adds 5 and 2 together and gets 10, ask if the answer should be a lot more than 5 or a little bit more than 5. And children can use their fingers or manipulatives to illustrate their thinking. Math is all about precision. After all, using a minus sign instead of a plus sign, or the numeral 6 instead of the numeral 5, completely changes both the question and the answer. Or in precise terms, it changes the equation. Students come to understand that, like changing the C in cat to an M changes the noun from something that can walk on you to something that you can walk on. I think this is very funny. Changing numbers alters the equation. Oftentimes when I talk about this mathematical practice, I am reminded about how 4 to 6-year-olds spend huge amounts of time discussing the rules to board games and games on the play yard, sometimes even more, actually many times, even more than they spend time playing the games. They just really concentrate on the rules, and they're incredibly precise about these, and they insist that others are the same. Teachers provide students with accurate definitions and accurate depictions. So for instance, a rectangle is a closed figure with 4 sides and 4 right angles. Notice I didn't say that 2 sides were shorter than another, because that's not really part of the definition. They also provide opportunities to explore the meaning of equality and the equal sign, and they provide accurate representation. For instance, on the right here, you can see a circle divided into 3 equal parts. That's the orange one. And a circle divided into 3 unequal parts. That's the one that's yellow, green, and purple. But only the first representation is of thirds. How we model thinking and talking about mathematics makes a difference. Even how we express our lack of knowledge. One of the questions I ask of college students is the definition of a circle. But I had to look it up. I actually didn't know what it was. And I had to think about, how is it different from an oval? If you want to explore this yourself, think about how we can use a compass, that's what this tool is that's spinning around, speaking of tools, to create a circle. And hint, all points on the curve are equidistant from the center. I had always wondered why they include these in back to school kits. Like, it just, I never, like, we got those when we went to back to school, you know, in September when I was a kid, and I never used them. But now I know what they make. Number 7, look for and make use of structure. So students look for and create patterns. They look for and make use of structure, and they see the relationships between mathematical topics. Young children look at and for structure from birth on, from the patterns of the maternal speech to caterpillars in the yard. Look, I have black and white stripes, just like Leah. Finding patterns in both the environment and in mathematics. I know, 1 plus any number is just the next number. Our job is to ensure that they continue to look at the structure of mathematics in an increasingly sophisticated way. 4 trucks plus 3 trucks is the same amount as 3 trucks plus 4 trucks. Children should be provided with opportunities to see structure in mathematics every day. Teachers provide opportunities for students to identify, extend, and create patterns. They call attention to symmetry. They make connections between mathematical topics explicit, and they encourage students to look for structure while problem solving. So this 4 plus 3 is the same as 3 plus 4. This is the numerals that they see that go along with the set of 3 and 4 trucks, and they model with objects. Number 8, look for and express regularity in repeated reasoning. Can young children really do this? Yes, you knew I was going to say yes. Even the aforementioned understanding that 1 plus a number equals the next number in the counting sequence is representative of regularity in repeated reasoning. Think about a child who is exactly 2 years younger than their sibling. That doesn't happen very often, that they're exactly 2 years with the same birthday, but just go with it for a minute. From a very young age, they catch on that this will never, ever change. No matter how old they are, they're still going to be 2 years younger than their sibling. In contrast, think about a child who's 1.5 years younger. Soon they realize that maybe, say by March, that they're going to be 1 year apart in age, right? But in December, they're 2 years apart in age. I can imagine that child feeling extra excited on their birthday when they become only 1 year younger than their sibling. Young children may begin to understand that for whole numbers, multiplication is repeated addition. This doesn't work for fractions though. So think about 1/2 times 1/2. That doesn't work. So we're talking about whole numbers here. Teachers create sets of problems that can use the same problem-solving process. Ask students to talk about their solutions. What do you know about these problems? Ask students to think of other problems that are similar to the one at hand. How are they similar? I hope that by now you've seen that the mathematical practices are for all students and that I've been persuasive, even the very youngest, like Amanla, 2.5. And now it's your turn. This is a film clip about Jaden. I want you to think about the fact that when children reach our classrooms, they're not blank slates. As I play this video, I want you to think about which of the mathematical practices Jaden is using. And then at the end, I'll show you the list of mathematical practices again, so you don't have to like memorize them and think of them like right now. I'm going to show them again for you. And then in the chat, I'm going to have you enter those which you think Jaden used, right? And I'll come back. I'll give you those instructions again after the video. So right now, just sort of sit back, watch the video of Jaden.
Very hard, Jaden.
18.
How many bears?
18.
Can you count them one more time nice and loud so I can hear the numbers?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
So how many bears do you have?
18.
So I have a question for you. Is it about 20 bears? How many more bears would I need to give you?
Two.
So how many more bears would I need to give you?
2.
How'd you figure that out? What'd you do?
Because I count all of these, and so I count 18. So I count more, and then I count 2. So that's 2, and then I got another one. So that's 20. So it's 2 more.
So what were the numbers that you said after you said 18? When you were thinking about the numbers?
And then it comes 20.
Nice job, Jaden. Awesome. Right.
Okay. So what does Jaden know? Which mathematical practices does he use? So what I want you to do is put your answers in the chat, because these are all single digit. You can just put them one right after the other. You don't need to put commas or anything because that takes too long. I'll give you a little bit of time. So as an example, you might put 1, 3, 4, 6 or something like that. I didn't pick those on purpose. That was random. So if you could start putting those in the chat, that would be great. And then we'll talk about these. So I'll give you a little bit of time here. Okay. I see quite a few of number 1s coming in. Also number 6. What else is in here? Number 2, number 3. Not too many of number 7 or 8. So let's talk about this for just a little bit. So make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. A lot of people put number 1 here. He definitely persevered in doing this. He counted them multiple times. He answered, he stuck with it. And he very carefully thought about what he was being asked. Reason abstractly and quantitatively. That 19 and 20 that he counted, those little bears were not there. He had to imagine those in his head. That was more of an abstract type of problem. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Not so much arguments, but basically he did explain his, he wasn't arguing about how he counted the bears, but he explained how he counted the bears. Modeling with mathematics, he was definitely doing that, right? He was moving those over. He was using that to solve the problem. Use appropriate tools strategically, not as much. I don't think anybody put so far that I can see 5 in there. Attend to precision. A lot of you put one-to-one correspondence, which he did an amazing job with, right? He did one-to-one correspondence all the way through each time he counted. So that was definitely attending to precision there. Look for and make use of structure. Not so much, although he did, in some ways, as he was keeping track of the bears, he's moving them over to the side, right? And so he's putting them in 2 different categories. One category of these are counted and these are not yet counted. Look for and express regularity and repeated reasoning. Not so much about that. I don't think I saw any 8s coming through here either. But I think a little bit of all of these that he, I think mathematical practices, when we really take a look at them, that almost all of them are involved in really interesting problems that we can pose for children. So I have another film clip, and this is for Jada. I'm not sure why they have similar names, but they do. And so we're going to look again at which mathematical practices is she engaging in, and we're going to repeat the same process that we use with Jada, and I'll show you the mathematical practices after I show the video. So as I play this video, I want you to think about which of the mathematical practices Jada's using. At the end, I'm going to show you the list, and then you'll enter them. So I'm going to play it now.
Okay, this one is about Ms. Morrissey. Okay? Ms. Morrissey had 20 cupcakes. She put the cupcakes into 4 boxes so that there were the same number of cupcakes in each box. How many cupcakes did Ms. Morrissey put in each box?
How many should go in each box?
Yeah. So let's read the story again. Ms. Morrissey had 20 cupcakes. She put the cupcakes into 4 boxes so that there were the same number of cupcakes in each box. How many cupcakes did Ms. Morrissey put in each box?
Each box would have 5 cupcakes.
Nice. Can you say a little bit about what you did to figure that out?
I did is I took 3 cupcakes to each pile, and then I took one at a time of 1 or 2 into one of the piles.
And how did you know when you were done? Like, how did you know when you had figured it out?
Because I did in this pile, it had 4, and then one more on top,
Mm-hmm.
and this had it 5. So this one had 5 too.
Awesome. Get it. Very cool.
So what does Jada know? Which mathematical practice she use? Again, you can put your answers in the chat, list them all together in one entry. And I'll wait a few minutes because there's a little bit of a delay as the chat comes in. So I'll wait to see your answers. So I'm getting a lot of you that are writing ALL, all. There's like a list of these. I totally agree. So make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. So I love how she kept the story in her mind as she got started. And then she was like, I want to make sure I get it right. And so then she listens to the story again. Reason abstractly and quantitatively. Wow. You could see those wheels turning in her head as she's using reason to think about how she's going to divide up these cupcakes, right? And abstractly, because she doesn't have the cupcakes in front of her, does she? She's got these little Unifix cubes. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. I think along with Jaden before, that she's able to describe her problem-solving process. Model with mathematics, definitely. She's using those Unifix cubes as cupcakes. Use appropriate tools strategically. Someone really early on in the chat I saw mention this. One thing that I think is so interesting about the way she solves this problem is that she's estimating all the way through. So she kind of starts with groups of 3. And then she realizes as she's kind of making the groups of 3 that she's got a big pile left that haven't been used. So it's got to be more than 3 in each container, right? And so then you can see she kind of goes to 4, but very quickly she realizes 4 is not going to cut it either. So then she starts making groups of 5. So she is really using, number one, she's using these Unifix as tools, and she's using estimation all the way through, right? Attend to precision. This is my favorite when it comes to Jada. So what she does is she makes those groups of 3. She realizes she needs more than that. She makes groups of 4. Then she makes groups of 5. And she also talks about this at the end. But you can see that when she's all done and she's describing her problem-solving process, she has a group of 5 that has 3 in one row and 2 in the next row down with a space in between. And so 2 of her groups have that's what they look like. That's how they're structured. As she's explaining, she realizes that her 2 other groups don't look like that. One is, I think, a row of 4 and a row with, and the other one has a row of 3, but the 2 don't have a space between there together. So as she's explaining, reforming that structure so that all 4 of those groups look alike, and they all have 3 in one row and 2 in the next row with a space in between. She's tending to precision. Look for and make use of structure all the way through this entire thing. She is looking for and making use of structure. Look for and express regularity and repeated reasoning. Repeated reasoning, we do this a lot in multiplication and in division. And as she's dividing these up, she is not only looking for, but she's also expressing regularity and repeated reasoning. I just absolutely love this video. You can tell because I get like really excited about it. Okay. So now that we've spent some time talking, and thank you so much for participating. This is a little difficult when we're on webinars to get participation, but you were all amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about the foundational supports that undergird our ability to scaffold children's use of these practices. In other words, what else do we need to pay attention to in the early childhood classroom? And then I'm going to follow that up with a short look at some resources that can support us in these endeavors. So we need to meet children where they are. I know you all know this. This is particularly true in the first years in our classroom. Children come to us with a wealth of informal mathematical knowledge, but this mathematical knowledge is based on their experience, and each child has a different experience. This is true all the way through school, but at some point there's a curriculum that they experience in the classroom. Perhaps it's because there's a textbook, perhaps it's because all children have the same activities. But when children first enter school, it's really, really different. Their experiences are really different because they don't have that sort of collective experience, right? They might know that they have 2 ears, 2 eyes, 2 hands, and 2 feet. They might know that when the number 8 shows up on the clock, mom needs to leave for work. And if there's 6 trains to be shared, that if they get 3 of them, that's fair. Fair sharing starts so early. These are skills that they've gained through interactions in their environments prior to entry to formal school. And as you can see, the knowledge that children bring to the classroom will vary widely. I can't say that enough. And teachers need to meet children where they are and support them as they gain new and increasingly sophisticated mathematical skills and knowledge. Meeting children where they are importantly includes formative assessment and differentiated instruction. So what are these? I'm sure many, if not all of you already know this. Formative assessment informs instruction. That's how I first memorized that word, formative informs. You can use the information that you gain to figure out what activities and information you'll use next to support development. But it's not as simple as just writing a lesson plan, though that's not simple either, for the whole class. Each student will have different levels of knowledge and ability, and it's our job to provide this differentiated instruction for each child based on what we've learned. I think I talk about this in all of my presentations, but I think it bears repeating. Unlike older students, most children in early childhood can't be assessed with written assessments. We can't just give them a piece of paper with questions and problems on it, right? So teachers need to be keen observers and engagers of children. This example that I'm going to give, I think it provides a kind of a window into what we don't know about children's thinking sometimes. Because we can't see inside their heads. So if we hear a child say to one another, "You have more dinosaurs than I do," we can probably assume that child has some sense of number, but is their claim based on the size of the pile, which is not necessarily numerosity, because you might have a pile of 3 gigantic dinosaurs and 6 smaller dinosaurs. So it's not about the number, it's about the size of the pile. Is their claim based on the numerosity itself? Did they actually count both, right? And then they actually have a number that's assigned to each of those 2 sets. Or maybe they have a history of playing with this child, and I know that this other child always takes more dinosaurs than they get, right? These are 3 different ways about thinking of quantity. So you can ask children questions. Tell me how you know. How did you figure that out? Why do you think that? Can you show me how you know? And then be ready to follow up with other questions during that conversation. We know that successful mathematics learning requires a positive learning environment and that fully engages children and promotes their enthusiasm for learning. So I mentioned this way back at the very beginning. Not everybody loves math, and this goes for teachers too, although I suspect I probably have a select group on this webinar. Every child can learn math. Math isn't something that we either have or we don't have, and we need to exude this attitude in our classrooms, that everyone can improve and gain more mathematical abilities and come to engage with interest, if not joy. I've told stories and shown video. I mean, Jaden was just, that little smirk on his face was just priceless. That illustrates how math can exist joyfully in the classroom. So, what do you do and what can you do to support early mathematical development? I'm hoping that you're at the very least starting to understand the useful role that mathematical practices can play in the early childhood classroom. By all the answers that I got, I think that you're already doing this. I am going to wrap this up with just a couple slides on some free and available resources, especially those from the DREAM network. So what is the DREAM Network? It was established in 2014. It stands for Development and Research in Early Mathematics. It's a network of scholars. You can see I'm down there under San Francisco State in the bottom row. And it's collaborative research and development with the goal of advancing the field of early math learning and teaching. And we have a lot of undergraduate students, graduate students, and postdocs working with us who also contribute greatly to our projects. There's 4 projects that are produced by the network: family math, teachers, teacher educators, and pre-K through 3 alignment. These were the 4 projects that we began at when we first started the network, and we've been working on them ever since. I've worked on all 4 of these, primarily the teacher educator one though. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the resources from the DREAM Teacher Educator Project, because they provide resources about the mathematical practices, also formative assessment, differentiated instruction, teacher-student engagement. The website for the TE project is divided into modules. You can see them here. This is a screenshot. So 5 of them are mathematical domains, and then the blue one is an overview module. Within each of those 5 domains that I showed you on the previous slide, there are resources grouped into 7 different categories. In reality, the website lists these on the left-hand side of the screen for counting, and so they are vertical, not horizontal, but I'm going to make a point here, so I put them horizontally. The 3 categories in the top row are all about the development of, in this case, children's counting, and the bottom 4 are about formative assessment, supporting teachers in the field, or in the classroom, basically. Vignettes about teachers engaging in current issues in the field, such as blending play-based philosophy and engaging math instruction. There's one in there on fear of math. Then there's Getting Started, which are collections of resources for a variety of implementations, from things like 2-day workshops in professional development, so maybe a 3-hour college unit on counting, or maybe counting in operations, things like that. This is a screenshot from the formative assessment page in counting. Sorry, it's so tiny. These examples of formative assessment include the use of observation, activities, and engaging questions. You'll have access to this PowerPoint later, and the links are on the right-hand side of the slides. This illustrates similar categories for the patterns and algebra subdomain. Again, the top 3 talk about development. And this is an example of the formative assessment for patterns in algebra, very similar to the one on counting. These examples also include the use of observations, activities, and engaging questions. And then much of what I've talked about regarding the mathematical practices can be found here. This is, again, a screenshot, including some of the stories that you've heard today. And this resource is in the overview module, that blue part. So there's 5 subdomains, and then there was a blue part that has an overview of kind of mathematics as a broader field. You can also search the DREAM Teacher Educator website yourself by topic. So like by shapes, addition, or fair sharing, there's a search function there. And then at the bottom of the main screen, you can search by type of resource, like videos or handouts or activities. And you can also, once you get into the videos, you can also search those by those subdomains like counting or operations. And the Jada and Jaden videos are on this website. So if you want to use them for your classroom, if you want to look at them again, you can find them there. I'm briefly going to go over the other 3 projects. I mentioned that I primarily work on the teacher educator one, but I do work on the other ones. This is a screenshot from the opening screen on family math, and family math has resources for those who work with families, right? So they work directly with families, engaging them in early mathematics. This is a screenshot from the opening screen on the teacher project, and this one has resources for center time, has guided activities and math moments, which has great ideas for including math in classroom routines and transitions. All of these are really good. The math moments, it's great for if you're, we do way too much standing in line in all classrooms, but so it gives you activities that you can do when you're standing in line, when children are getting their coats, going outside, washing their hands, and things like that. So there are short things that you can do that are embedded in classroom routines and in transitions. And then last but not least, this is a screenshot from the opening screen on the pre-K through 3 alignment project. So the goal of the DREAM preschool through elementary school coherence, we called it COHERE, is to identify policies and practices that are associated with high quality continuous math education from preschool through the early grades. We know that one of the things that's important is that as children move from grade to grade, that they have not necessarily a similar experience, but a connected experience. And so this talks about investigations that we did into policies and what can be done and what can support that. And so now I want to turn it over to you. Let's see if I can turn off my PowerPoint. There we go. And ask you to put your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. As I mentioned, there's a bit of a delay as the questions come in, but I'll pick them up as they come in. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of time to put those in. And I have like maybe about 9 to 10 minutes to do that. And many of you had talked about, oh, somebody put the link right in there. Thank you, Gabriella. Let's see. A bunch of you put the email, not the email, the web address in there. Does the website have formative assessments? Yes. Oh, thank you for asking. Each one of those modules has a category on it for formative assessment. And it talks, sometimes there's more, actually, I think almost all the time, there's more than one document in there. And these documents have a list of questions that you can ask children, activities that you can do in the classroom. They also have how you can use your observation skills to see where children are. Because as I mentioned before, we're not giving these children worksheets to try and figure out, how they're doing at age usually 4, 5, 6. And so there's one in counting, there's one in data and measurement, there's one in spatial relationships, there's one in each of them. And then there's some additional ways of assessing children's knowledge. There's some about clinical interviews. Those of you who studied Piaget, you'll remember that he used clinical interviews. So there's some of that too. So thank you for that question. Let me see. Let's see here. What were the ages of Jaden and Jada? Jada was in kindergarten, and I think Jaden was 4, if I remember correctly. So that's that. When will the TK math standards for California be finalized? Actually, I think there's a meeting later on today where I think we're talking about these. At 11, maybe, I think that we're talking about these. So they're in the works. The drafts have been done. They've been kind of reviewed. And so they're close. They're very close. And as you know, they need to be in place so that we can use them very soon, especially with the pre-K through 3 credential coming down the pike. Let's see. Do I have any recommendations for textbooks to use in teaching mathematics for pre-K to 3rd grade? I would argue for the earlier grades, in particular for pre-K and for kindergarten, not textbooks. And for above that, there have been some studies on textbooks. I don't have them memorized, unfortunately, but you can look. Google Scholar, I think, has that. I'm trying to think of. Yeah, I don't really have recommendations. I hadn't thought about that question, unfortunately. Yeah, and I think that textbooks can be used to keep children kind of all on the same page. But I also worry about the use of textbooks sometimes around differentiated instruction, because it's easy to kind of to get lost in trying to keep up with the textbook. And I realize that's also school district it can be mandated by school districts or within schools. But yeah, I would leave that decision up to those folks. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for that one. And there's some folks who are child care providers at home, so FCCs. That's wonderful that you're on here. You do such important work. Thank you. Best strategies to support students with very little or no math exposure. I think to take advantage of the math exposure that they do have. So like fair sharing, right? When there's resources that children are playing with another child or multiple children, they're always thinking about math because they want to know how many they have. So taking advantage of those. I think children frequently have skills that we don't quite see. And so we have to kind of pull them up so that we can see them. And so a good example is that children are gathering data all the time. They're gathering data to answer questions that are important to them and kind of pulling that knowledge out of their heads by asking questions. So I think the first step would be making sure that we understand what skills they have by asking them all these questions and having them start talking about mathematics. And then just sort of keeping an eye on what they do know. And I know that when I was working with children, one of the ways that I expressed my teaching philosophy to parents was that I'm going to find out where your child is as best I can and offer them the next challenge, right? So always keeping just a little bit above what they know. So we're talking about sort of Vygotsky here. And I think we think about this, even if there wasn't a Vygotsky, we still think about the next challenge for children. Let's see. And then what are the ages of Jaden and Jada? Again, folks asked. Jada, I think, is in kindergarten, and I think Jada is 4 years old. But if you go to the website, that you'll see that. Recommended books to assist with lessons. There's books on counting collections. So Megan Franke and her team make really good use of that. I'm trying to think. I actually usually have a couple of books in do I have that one in I'm looking in my drawer here. Oh, so there is an NAEYC. I feel like I'm a salesperson here. The Young Child in Mathematics, which has some good writings in it. Again, I'm showing my nerdiness that I actually keep these in a drawer next to my desk. I think the one on counting collections I have on my desk, but I think it's buried in a pile. But I would recommend that also. How can you modify the strategies if you have children with an IEP or learning difficulties? I think understanding where they are, and again, working with the folks who help develop the IEP, I think is really important. But figuring out where children are, we always need to start with where they are and then try to figure out the next challenge, and do that across all of the subdomains of mathematics. Make sure that we're giving them a broad experience. I think sometimes we think, oh, they need to know the numbers, right? They need to recognize numbers. They need to be able to name numbers. I think that we need to think more broadly about it because sometimes children have skills in other areas that that really not only make them shine, but that we can take advantage of because there's always interconnections between these different subdomains. I feel like I'm giving these like really quick answers and not doing justice to them. How will we receive the PowerPoint? Somebody else on this call will have to answer that one because I don't know the answer to that. But there's some people in the background who are helping with that. See some math practice strategies for children 0 to 3 of age. Last summer on that Dream Network in the overview, I actually listed all of the resources for children's ages 0 to 3 that exist on the TE website. And so if you go to the overview, there's something I think about infants and toddlers. I forgot what it's called. And that should have resources not specific to the mathematical practices, but it pulls across all of those subdomains and pulls out all of the information about 0 to 3. So I hope that that's helpful. It's not exactly about the mathematical practices, but it is 0 to 3. Let's see if there's other. And then another question about textbooks. Sorry, I don't have that. Some folks who do use the Dream website. A bunch of thank yous. Thank you for listening to me for so long without interaction. I am not used to no interaction. And so it was wonderful to see your listing of the mathematical practices in the chat. Does the website have recommended accommodations or activities for our students with special needs? Not specifically, no. Again, I think that the way I think about this is, one, working with the folks who help create the IEPs, working with your special education folks, and then thinking about the next step and making sure that it's broad across all of the domains. Do we get professional hours in this website? You're going to ask somebody else in the background, who are super helpful. They've been helping me this whole week about getting ready for this. They can answer that question. Are younger children such as 2 and 3 not on the TE website? That first one, I have to confess, is actually my granddaughter. And that was me asking her the question. So that's how that video exists. And that's not on the website. So I'm sorry, there's not videos of younger children. Any recommendations of textbooks for professors teaching mathematics for preschool to 3rd grade? Not aside from those books that I mentioned earlier, the NAEYC. There are some out there, and I think that other folks that are on this webinar today also have some resources that will help you with that. And the state of Utah wants to talk to me. Sure, email me. The whole state can email me. And I got like about 1 minute left here. Kate Brown, good to see you. Yep, we're still developing resources. Special education again. Let me see. Let me do one more question if there's one in here. Where's this? How can you incorporate hands-on math for homework? That's a really interesting question. I think trying to figure out what you would be doing in the classroom and then translating that into instructions for parents. You can also see the Family Math website. I think that would be a good resource for that. And it's now 10:10. Again, I want to thank you. I think I have a thank you slide. Let's see. It's not that exciting, but it does say thank you. There. So thank you so much. I really appreciate all your time, and I wish you a wonderful experience for the remainder of today. And I am going to sign off. Thank you so much.